My final guest this afternoon is a former member of Congress. Mike Rogers served as the chairman of the powerful House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence during his time in office. Mike, it's great to see you, and I know you have been working a lot on how the United States, dealing in a time of serious crisis, needs to better position itself with regards to supply chains. So what does your map look like in terms of how we reorient?
Yeah, and I can't tell you how important this is. And I know there's a lot of effort out there about what does supply chains look like. And there's a lot of people with equities who don't want their cheese moved also weighing in on this really important issue. So this, to me, is so important to get a group together that starts to ask these hard questions and how to get them answered. Like, how did we allow ourselves to have 80% of all of our pharmaceutical ingredients offshore? 80%, most of that's in China. And so when there is this kind of global pandemic, China is going to take care of itself first. And we saw that happen. And so we're having these discussions of how do we incentivize, reshoring to America some capability for this? How do we incentivize companies in the pharmaceuticals to re-engage in this notion that you don't have to give up international trade? We understand that that is good for consumers. Prices go down. But how can we arrange this by incentive with the government to encourage you to be here, to have the capability to manufacture in a surge capacity? And there's a lot of really good and creative ways. And so what's really good about this, Steve, is that through a group called Principle to Principle, they pulled together some really impressive people, University of Michigan supply chain experts, Case Western University, and this is a Michigan and Ohio thing. And if those two can work together to solve this problem, anything can get done, right? Michigan and Ohio, that's a big deal. Where I come from. And then, Siemens, government technology, and 3M, and Johnson & Johnson, people who are right in the middle of this pandemic trying to get this stuff right, are willing to offer their insights. And they're working, and we're working together with folks in Congress, in the Senate, who have been giving us advice and counsel and giving us the art of the possible, so that when we're done, we're actually going to have real solution that's going to translate into hopefully pieces of legislation that can start answering how do we get companies to back here on shore? How do we get them invested in having this kind of surge capacity? And what kinds of things can we do for R&D here in the United States? All of that's going to get answered through this process of understanding the supply chain and doing something about the weaknesses in that supply chain.
Sure, and all of that makes a lot of sense to me. When I began digging into this topic and doing research myself, I had some of the numbers wrong. I was sort of, looking at it that America had greater capacity than I thought we had. Some of, China, certainly it's been shifting there, but it's not as big as I thought. But let me just show you, today's a day I've been showing everybody charts in this program. Let me start with one here. The chart I'm showing here lists facilities for the 370 drugs marketed in the United States based on the World Health Organization's essential medicines list and where these essential medicines come from. 21% are from the United States, along the lines you just said. 15% are from China, and the rest of the world, which I guess includes India and other major producers, about 64%. So when you look at that and you look at the size of China, the U.S.ness, I'm just wondering, are we hyped up in a way that we shouldn't be? Does that chart give you confidence, or does it give you worry?
Well, part of that 25% you saw in the United States has ingredients that are offshore. So that's what I think doesn't get reflected in that chart, and that's what would concern me. Can we produce the ingredients for the pharmaceuticals that end up taking care of people's health in the United States? And that part of it, I don't think we've gotten right. And I do think it causes us concern. Remember, we watched really bad behavior when these other countries, and I say that plural, were under stress from the same pandemic. And what happened was they were making decisions that didn't honor contract law, that did things that we would not do here in the United States. And they were deciding they were going to take care of themselves first, or their friends first, or fill in the blanks first. And so what that did is said, okay, we have to protect international trade. Really important to do that. But what we also have to do is have some capacity at home to fill those voids, to fill that hole. I think we, through that group I just talked about, are coming up with some really interesting and creative ways to do that, and I'm pretty excited. But you have to look at the ingredients as well as the last product that gets dropped in the bottle and delivered to your pharmacy.
Now, Mike, you and I have talked a lot about alliances and how important really trusted partners are in any global effort. And this comes to mind now that we saw Germany suspend some shipments of PPE. The United States, America first, a very a kind of self-centric posture that people like Peter Navarro were communicating to companies that have global responsibility and say, no, you've got to supply just the U.S. first. And I'm just interested in whether or not, I look at America as the place that would help other nations in its dark days, be there, take care of its needs and others. Do you think we're getting this right now, or do we have to worry about that what we used to consider to be trusted allies and what's being produced there, that we're not treating our allies as well as we should?
Well, this is the United States of America. We have more innovation here than practically the rest of the world, honestly. And my frustration here is that the United States' value in helping our neighbors and our allies brings stability and peace back to the shores of the United States. That's a very powerful, good tool. So I don't think we're necessarily getting it right. And the one way we can do it is understand that we are going to have this surge. Yes, we should be able to take care of ourselves first. I look at it as the airplane when the mask comes down and the instructions are, don't put it on your child first, put it on you first so you can help your child. Well, I see a little bit of that in this. It doesn't mean that we can't help and we shouldn't help. I think we should. But how do we make sure we have enough capacity when we need it? And to me, that the government is going to have to help with that, either through incentives, again, surge capability. So, yep, you can meet your contract with fill in the blank country. You should be obligated to that contract, but also you have this capacity that you can flip a switch and go into it. And again, we have some really creative ways on how to fill that hole and that void that I think are going to come off of this working group. And I'm pretty excited about that. And I think it's going to translate into real action. And that's the exciting part of this.
Now, you've been working on this working group with former Congressman Joe Crowley as well, as a Democrat. You're a Republican. When you finish the working group report, do you expect some of your former colleagues to pick this up legislatively?
Absolutely. And so we've been working in a bipartisan way in the Senate primarily. We have two offices who have said, hey, listen, we're going to watch your product. We'll give you some advice and counsel along the way. And we look forward to trying to find things in that product that we can do. So that's really rare for a project like this to already have legislative interest. To try to track and see what we have. And, they're going to take things that they think will work and will pass. I always call it the art of the possible in Congress. And then they'll chuck some things, and that's all good. But the powerfulness of the group and the fact that you have members' offices who are already interested in seeing this product tells me we're going to get somewhere. And I loathe doing things that don't have an actionable outcome at the end of it.
Just as we conclude, you're talking in ways that make so much sense to me, but as you kind of look at, I interviewed Anthony Fauci a year and a half ago, and in that conversation, he basically described the kind of pandemic that he most feared, that he most thought was coming our way, and it just looks and breathes and feels like what hit us with COVID-19. Are you optimistic, Mr. Chairman, about our ability to handle the next crisis that hits? Are we beginning in the middle of this to get things right, to come together? I know this is a meta question, it's a hypothetical, but you either feel like things are coming together or things are coming apart. And so where are you in that?
Well, the one thing that killed this effort, if we were going to be candid, and we should do that, everybody's now is in the political position of having to blame someone else, or at least they think they have to. So the governors blame the administration blames the governors, the local community health blames the state, all of the blame going around. The truth be told, nobody was prepared in the way we should have been prepared for this. Nobody. And, if you remember when they came out and said masks don't help, and now, if you don't wear a mask, you're going to go to jail kind of thing. And, the answer probably was, whoops, we just didn't know that. I wouldn't blame anybody. I wouldn't say, oh my God, they were terrible. That was the conventional wisdom at the time. So we're a lot smarter coming out of this. And my fear is if we don't do things like we're doing with this task force to say, how are we prepared? And these are the nuts and bolts kinds of things. Some of it isn't all that exciting, but really, really important. important. And same with that. What are the protocols? Do you go to mass? What happens next? And I've lived through this before. So I was really active in the BARDA legislation, the biomedical all hazards preparedness and all of those kinds of things. And what we found was lots of interest in the beginning because we had SARS and these other kind of big looming things coming at the United States that we thought we weren't ready for. So we passed these bills, put some money aside, put some authorities inside. And guess what? Once that was gone, everybody lost interest. And so I worry a lot about this. Now, this was different, and it not only impacted us, impacted the rest of the world, nearly shut down our economy. Hopefully people realize, okay, we've got to stop blaming everybody. Start working together on how we take what we have learned, and it's okay to learn during this, and use it on the other side of this. If we're not having these conversations even a year or 18 months after this, then shame on us. We as a country, we're not doing it right, and we're not doing our citizens a service by having these conversations. And again, that's when all the blame should stop. And we should say, okay, gosh, if we had done this again, what would it look like? And how do we prepare ourselves for something that we may not expect, meaning have enough stockpiles for personal protective gear, and how do we make sure that companies can produce into that stockpile at a moment's notice? There's contracting ways we can do all of those kinds of things need to be put in place, and this should be the impetus to do it. I think we're still going to make some mistakes along the way here, candidly, and people are going to find lots of people to blame for that. The truth is, we just were not ready in state, local, or national government for something like this, even though they had tools available. So I think let's let the election go and then start, get bias. And then we ought to start looking at, okay, how do we prepare ourselves so it isn't a big political food fight about whose fault it is that this thing is spreading across the country. That's where we would love to be. And we're not there yet, but we're going to get there. And to me, this effort is a really good start.
Well, thank you for that. Mike Rogers, former chair of the House Intelligence Committee and now co-chair of a global task force on supply chains. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, and keep at it. When you get your report done, come back and talk to us about it, please.
We'd love to do that. Thanks, Steve. Look forward to that.